to develop. Still a lot of dry weather on offer, but just a chance of some showers fringing in to exposed areas of the UK, particularly around the coasts, coming in on the breeze. And that breeze is the important thing for tomorrow, because on the face of it, our temperatures actually look somewhat better than today. In some areas, they're up into double figures, but that northwesterly breeze remains strong throughout the day. So wherever you are, if you're exposed to that, it is still going to feel rather chilly, and perhaps not helped by the fact those skies will be somewhat greyer. A chance of a few stray showers pushing in on the breeze across from the northwest of England down into the Midlands through the second half of the day. For the southwest of England, though, quite a pleasant afternoon out of that breeze. 12 degrees in Plymouth with some sunshine. Some shelter in South Wales should be pretty pleasant as well. And the best of our sunshine for Northern Ireland will go to the east. A change to come here, though, for Wednesday. Some thicker cloud arriving and some outbreaks of rain, which will also extend into western Scotland and Wales. Central and eastern parts of the UK staying cloudy and rather on the chilly side.
Susan, thank you very much.
Now, before you go, let's bring you a reminder of tonight's main news. 5,000 birds are being slaughtered after bird flu was found on a farm in Suffolk.
Coming up on News 24, all the day's entertainment news, including Still Going and Still Rocking. We hear from Foreigner as they hit the road for a 30th anniversary tour.
Time now, though, nearly 6:30. It's time to join the BBC's news teams. Where you are. Goodbye for now.
Bye-bye.
Hello, welcome to Look North. Coming up in tonight's programme. His life was ruined at birth. Now his family wins a multi-million-pound payout. Mission accomplished. A huge police operation ensures no problems at the big match. The power station that's good for the environment, the UK's first wood burner, opens on Teesside. And Pudsey and Paul go on the road to find out what a difference your contributions can make to children in need.
Paul and Pudsey, which one was which though?
Oh, stop.
No, sorry about that. But in sport, with the best of the action from the Premier League and the FA Cup, including, of course, the goals and the big talking points from the long-awaited Weir Tyne derby.
What value can you put on a life that'll never be fulfilled? Well, one family has just been told £3.6 million. Kelly Smith and Alan Crawford's son Bradley suffered severe brain damage at birth. The medical team at Whitehaven's Cumberland Infirmary failed to notice he was being starved of oxygen. He was left with cerebral palsy, unable to speak or walk. And that was 7 years ago, at the start of a long legal battle that ended when the hospital admitted negligence. Well, Laura Bicker is with the family right now. Laura.
Well, this is the man of the moment. This is Bradley. And £3.6 million might seem like a lottery win, but actually when you break it down, it takes £170,000 a year to care for Bradley. And that just doesn't go too far. Well, Kelly's his mum. Kelly, tell me, I mean, when you first found out what happened, what went through your mind?
We did find out that 20 minutes earlier, if Bradley had been born 20 minutes earlier, he would have been fine. It's a bit heart-wrenching to think that your son could have been running around outside on the garden with his sister.
I mean, you still get emotional about it now, even after the payout. What battles have you been through to get this far?
Been through a lot of battles. It's been really hard work and really emotional.
I mean, Alan, you really feel quite strongly that more needs to be done to help families like yourself. I mean, what have you been through?
Awful lot. It's been an uphill struggle every day, just dealing with Bradley's disability alone, let alone, the local authorities have been very unhelpful. They just didn't prioritise Bradley at all, and we were just sort of living in appalling circumstances, to be honest. There really needs to be a lot more done to improve, facilities for people that are disabled.
It must have felt like adding insult to injury when you had, you're fighting the hospital trust and you're also fighting on both sides to try and get care for Bradley. Is that right?
Yeah, certainly, yes. But it's a big relief to get the breakthrough, that we've longed for. It really does help maintain the quality of care that Bradley very much needs and depends on, and it also allows us to resume a normal life as possible. And it also enables us to, get out there and get our careers back.
I mean, Kelly, what kind of family life will you have now, as a whole, and with Mia here, who's wanting to play?
it'll be a lot happy and content, and now that we've got the care, it's great. It'll be great. Good for Bradley and good for us as a family.
Well, Bradley's being fed here, so we'll let him get on with his feed, and I think Mia wants to play, so back to you.
Laura, thank you. A former teacher who fled to the Philippines during his trial for a string of sex offences against children has been told he'll now have to serve a further 9 months in prison. Ronald Heron, who's 58 and from the Ashington area of Northumberland, was convicted in his absence back in January and sentenced to 9 years. He was arrested and charged with absconding after flying back into Heathrow. Our chief reporter Chris Stewart has the story.
So why did he come back? This afternoon, the prosecution told us he was trying to sell a house in North Yorkshire so he could use the money to stay in the Philippines. But the police stopped that from happening and say Heron was left with 2 options: come back himself or be brought back.
We'd like to think that we'd followed all avenues of inquiry and cut down his options. So I genuinely believe that the reason he came back at the end was the fact that we'd cut off some of his financial help. And we had a number of inquiries ongoing in the Philippines that would inevitably have led to his deportation anyway.
His victims must be very glad to see this day, because when he did a runner, they must have been pretty distraught.
And that's very true. I mean, they've been through a very difficult ordeal anyway, with a historic abuse and going through the trial process, and then at the 11th hour for him to do a runner and leave them with no option and no closure to the events, it was a very callous thing to do.
Instead of 9 years, then, it'll be 9 years and 9 months. One other matter, the court was told: he'll now sign the sex offenders register. Something, if he'd stayed around long enough last time, he would have heard came with his conviction for sexually assaulting children. Of course, Heron never did get to hear what was said about him at the end of his trial back in January. Today, it was the very same judge, Tim Hewitt, and he told Heron that he didn't intend to repeat what he said back then, and that if Heron was curious to know, then no doubt his lawyers have a transcript.
The police in Cumbria are hunting vandals who damaged a war memorial hours before a Remembrance Sunday service. Several sandstone slabs were smashed at the site in Maryport between 8:30 p.m. on Saturday and 4 yesterday morning. Council workers managed to clear up the mess before yesterday's service began. 2 northeast factories, which employ more than 130 people with disabilities, have been given a reprieve from closure. The Remploy factories in Ashington and Spennymoor will stay open as long as they can secure new business. But factories in Jarrow, Hartlepool, Stockton and York are still due to close. Now, new regulation of mobility scooters could be on the way after a Look North report last week. Tynebridge MP David Cleland, who sits on the Transport Select Committee, has said the committee should investigate these slow-moving scooters, which are often driven on busy main roads. Adrian Pitchers reports.
For Iris, a mobility scooter means freedom and independence. But this is a motorist's view of mobility scooters, dawdling along some of the busiest roads in our region. No wonder the Transport Select Committee may feel it's time for greater regulation of the scooters.
They're a great thing, and they've given a lot of mobility to a lot of people, and I think we saw in your piece last week that in fact people are finding a great benefit in using these things. However, as more and more of them are coming onto the road, and they become, some of them can go up at quite good speeds, I understand, there is an issue there as to how they interact between traffic and pedestrians, so I think it's something perhaps that we ought to be looking at.
At present, a scooter can be bought by anyone. There's no driving test, no motoring insurance, and only the biggest require a licence. For scooter owners and the rest of the public, greater clarity would seem to be in order.
Certainly we need to have perhaps some enhanced instruction for people, perhaps some rules as to where they can and cannot go, and better instructions to how to operate these things. I mean, sometimes people are getting on these things, can't even drive a car, never even ridden a bike, some of them, and getting on these things and driving around at some reasonable speed.
At 4 miles an hour top speed, mobility scooters have already outpaced current legislation. The legislators are now considering whether they should catch up.
The police have praised the behaviour of football supporters during and after the Wear Tyne derby on Saturday. More than 400 officers were on duty in case of trouble, and despite fears of violence between rival fans, there were only 5 arrests. Our reporter Roderick Stewart was there.
Passions as ever were high for this. A crowd of more than 47,000 descended on the Stadium of Light for what turned out to be a 1-all draw. And the police, with a heavy presence, were taking no chances. As the game finished, Newcastle fans were kept back inside for more than half an hour, Sunderland supporters leaving first. Things were a little bad-tempered, though, as the police moved them away. Here, there were some complaints from fans of heavy-handedness. When the Newcastle fans were allowed out, some were taken to their coaches, the others escorted to a nearby metro station. This was a carefully orchestrated police operation designed to keep both sets of fans apart, although not all fans were impressed.
This is all our taxpayers' money. Look how many places there, you think it's a war zone.
But there was tension outside the ground, wasn't there?
Well, there's always tension Newcastle playing Sunderland. There's always going to be tension. And you look at it, it's like Sarajevo.
I think it was one of the most successful operations in recent years. Derby matches in the past have been famed for damage, disorder, violence, arrests. There was 5 arrests, which is an extremely low number, and I think it was a peaceful derby match. And the feedback we've heard from different groups of supporters is it was a well-planned operation and no one got hurt.
Once taken to the nearby metro station, the Newcastle fans were put aboard a train back to Tyneside. While praising both sets of supporters, Northumbria police say the 5 arrests were for relatively minor offences.
Now, as the distances we have to travel for hospital treatment seem to increase all the time, technology is being used more and more to save patients the trouble. In Berwick, a system which means doctors in Ashington can check X-rays via a computer link has saved patients thousands of miles of travelling in the last year. Our health correspondent, Anne Castalis, reports.
So if you'd like to come and put your back against this board for me, that's fine.
Bronya Carr's worried she might have broken her shoulder after a fall at home, but the doctor who'll be checking her X-ray isn't in Berwick, where she lives, but more than 50 miles away in Ashington.
OK, and what happened?
She had a fall yesterday, lifting a piece of board in her garden.
Northumbria Healthcare Trust is one of the biggest geographical areas of any health trust in the country. But for patients, that could mean a round trip of more than 100 miles for treatment in hospital. But today, Bronya has been spared that journey.
Yeah, it looks fine. There's just a little bit of calcification.
Her consultant in Ashington says it's not broken and she can go home.
Very relieved, very relieved. It's a 2-hour journey down to the Wansbeck and back. And obviously I can't really drive with my arms, so then I'm going to have to find someone to take me down and then just sit and wait. No, it's really good. It's much better.
Telemedicine like this is being increasingly used by our hospitals, and while it's a godsend to patients in rural areas, it isn't the answer to everything.
I think patients and the GPs do need to know that certain treatments and certain opinions are going to come only from seeing the patient in front of you, talking to them and putting the whole process together.
Around 600 patients like Bronya have been spared the journey from Berwick to Ashington in the last year, and they've been saved more than 60,000 miles of travelling.
Bet they're glad of it. Now, a pregnant woman's been shot at as she walked down a street in Darlington. The 20-year-old, who's 13 weeks pregnant, was walking home from work when she was hit by a pellet fired from an air rifle. Fortunately, she wasn't hurt. An £18 million shopping centre has opened for business in Seaham in County Durham. Byron Place has brought 600 jobs to the former colliery town. It boasts a new Asda superstore and more than a dozen other retail outlets inside the 125,000 square foot mall. The UK's first wood-burning power station opened today, producing enough electricity to power 30,000 homes. The biomass station at Wilton-on-Teesside is so environmentally friendly, it'll produce that power while releasing 200,000 tonnes of CO2 less than a conventional power station. That's the equivalent of taking 67,000 cars off our roads every year. Mary Askew reports.
This is the past. Wilton Power Station, built in the 1950s and still using 100,000 tonnes of coal a week. And built alongside it, this is the future. Semcor's new biomass station, which uses wood. And the wood for that station is coming from 4 different sources. Offcuts from sawmills, wood that's been dumped on forest floors, recycled wood from pallets and things, and special fast-growing willow forests that have been planted across the northeast.
It's good because it's putting a principle into practice. The principle is that we need more renewable sources of energy to combat climate change. I think people are used to renewables like the wind turbines and solar energy, but this plant is about biomass, in this case using wooden materials for clean and green energy purposes.
For the owners, Semcor, the new plant is also significant as it underlines the recent success of the Wilton manufacturing site.
This is a £64 million investment for us, so it's been a very major investment. It's really a symbol for us, I think, of our of the resurgence that we've seen on this site, with lots of major plants now being constructed. A very exciting time.
Eventually the power station will need wood from 7,500 acres of fast-growing willow, so the new crop will be found all over the region, covering an area equivalent to 3,000 football pitches.
Right, we're into the final countdown for this year's Children in Need extravaganza. You can tell, can't you? This Friday, Paul Mooney, Colin Briggs and Wendy Gibson will be at the Reg Ed Centre near Penrith to present our coverage. There'll be loads of fun and games, including live music, a celebrity test of strength, and of course Pudsey Bear will be there as well. Well, the main aim of the night is to raise lots of money, but where exactly does your money go? Well, Pudsey and his chauffeur have been finding out just how much difference you can make to young lives.
Come on, Pudsey, look at the time. Is it straight on here? Do we turn left? Do we turn right? Pudsey, you watch the map, I'll watch the roads. Come on, Pudsey, we've a long way to go. Our first stop is in Cumbria, a place called Sunbeams. And if ever a place was aptly named, this is it. Sunbeams was set up to use music as therapy for children with special needs, and it seems to have a profound effect on them, encouraging them to be more sociable, expressive and independent. And our special visitor to the session, the ever popular Pudsey Bear, was a huge hit with the children. Some of the children have been coming here for a while, but for Leo here, it's only his second visit to the group, and the results are already noticeable.
I think it helps Leo socially. He gets to meet lots of other children and lots of other adults. It certainly helps with his signing he uses to communicate because he has language delays, and just this fun experience, it just helps him no end.
It does look like great fun.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So Annie, BBC Children in Need, what sort of difference has that made to Sunbeams?
It's made a massive difference. It means that we can actually pay Laura to come all the way from Leeds to do the signing. The parents seem to love the fact that the children can communicate, even when they can't speak, through signing all the songs. It means they've had a chance to shine. That's the wonder of the Children in Need money. It's made such a huge difference to being able to keep our project going.
Sunbeams is only one of the many groups in the northeastern Cumbria where your Children in Need donations make a real difference to real lives. Next stop, North Yorkshire.
It's good to see, isn't it? Now, no prizes for guessing what's in the sport tonight, Jeff.
Yes, thank you very much, Carol. We'll kick off tonight where else but at the Stadium of Light, a point apiece, honours even. Not a great game, but a day to remember for the Newcastle owner, Mike Ashley.
The bloke is becoming an absolute legend, Jeff. Look at this, captured on a camera phone, comparing bellies with one of the Toon Army. Can you imagine Freddie Shepherd having done that? Don't answer that. It's best not to think about it, is it?
Well, this is him arriving at the Stadium of Light with the fans as well.
Yeah, talk about going beyond the call of duty. I mean, he's a bloke who could afford a bevy of naked dolly birds to carry him to the ground, and he comes on a supporters coach. Meets a load of blokes who still haven't got their pyjamas off.
The Sunderland fans then, they probably should have had more to cheer about, because really Sunderland had enough chances to have won the game twice over.
Well, they'll be kicking themselves, Jeff, won't they? And that they didn't take advantage, particularly in the first half. And I mean, they've scored just 13 goals now so far this season. Only the teams below them have got a sort of worse haul than that, and it's obviously something they're going to have to address if they're going to stay up.
At least that one was on target from Michael Chopper. And then
this is really quick thinking from Ken Wynne-Jones, who chased that ball down for a corner.
He did, and a very nicely floated cross from Grant Ledbetter. Danny Higginbottom's first goal for Sunderland. I think he enjoyed it.
But look at this angle we've got here. With his hand in the air, running in. I mean, Newcastle defence, you know, would you have seen if he had a big red flag? He ran a third of the pitch. Bit of Christmas party dancing comes early, and some of it, Jeff, spills onto the pitch.
Yes, which you probably shouldn't have done if the FA might look into that.
They're excited, man, let them be.
And Newcastle's equaliser?
Yeah, which is eerily reminiscent of Portsmouth's 4th against them last week, the way it creeps across there. What do you think of Craig Gordon on that, Jeff?
Maybe should have had that one covered, shouldn't he? Yes. And this guy enjoyed it, didn't he?
Yeah, there he is, celebrating with, well, with 3,000 of his new best mates.
Michael Owen, not much of a chance, a half chance towards the end, and then Michael Chopra very nearly won it for Sunderland right at the death. 1-1, and this was the official verdict.
You know, we had the chances, we didn't take them, so we got nobody to blame but ourselves. And again, you know, in terms of the performance and the attitude of the players, I thought we were different class.
The goal had an element of fortune about it. I guess you need that.
What, their goal?
Your goal.
Our goal. I thought the build-up play was fantastic. Superb ball across, so sometimes they go in.
It was disappointing that we didn't play the way we did after they scored before, because I thought we passed the ball a lot better after they scored, and in the end it was nice to get a point and break the rot and the routine we've got into away from home where we haven't been picking up points.
The atmosphere was amazing. You know, I don't think it's really until you get involved with one of the football clubs in the North East that you realise how passionate and how important football is to the people here.
Yeah, I think Roy was right. Sam Allardyce will be the happier manager tonight, because I think if the truth be known, they probably didn't deserve anything out of the game. Sunderland will be devastated if they hadn't won the game. They certainly had enough chances to have won it.
And if he thinks Sunderland should have won, who are we to argue with him? Not quite sure what to make of this though, Clem. The FA have decided not to punish Joey Barton for this challenge on Dixon Etuhu.
Right, so this is accidental, is it? There is no malice intended in that. He doesn't play the ball off and then turn in a completely different direction and deliberately stick his studs in Dixon Etuhu's doodads, eh?
Well, the FA, what they've said is, while it's clear the officials didn't see the full extent of the incident, they did see the players coming together. To take any further action would be tantamount to re-refereeing the game.
Well, I tell you what, Etuhu does well not to react more than he does there. I mean, goodness me, it's part and parcel of the game now, is it? That an opponent can kick your bits off.
Yes, very nearly got themselves sent off at half-time there, just from getting involved. Anyway, on to the next game, on to Middlesbrough. Goalless draw at Bolton in front of just 17,000 fans. Borough's last away game at Old Trafford, watched by 75,000.
Yeah, the worst ever Premiership attendance at the Reebok. He obviously got wind of what was to follow. Gareth Southgate in the stand with his chief executive, and his chairman is just out of shot. He's been given categoric assurances that his job is safe. I mean, when you bear in mind the run that Borough have been on, they're not going to kick a point at Bolton out of bed, are they? Even though it was about as entertaining as Phil Collins. Not very.
Who's back in the charts now?
Well, he's still not very entertaining, is he? A bit like this. Oh, look at this fella here with this hair once again. It's like he's got a dead cat on his head, isn't it? Anyway, back to the football. You can tell we're struggling for something to say.
Back to the short-haired players. Oh, great to see Manny Pogatet's back in the Borough side and getting in tough challenges like this that well, gave Borough the best chance in the game. Jeremy Ali should have scored.
Yeah, but this, you know, you can see Borough have scored one less than Sunderland, haven't they? And it's finishing like that. I don't know why they don't recall Adam Johnson has scored 5 in 11 now with Watford. He could play up front, Stuart Downing could play up front, but at least he's finding the net. He's got to be worth bringing back.
0-0 and Middlesbrough definitely more happy than Bolton with that point. Well, this is what the table looks like now. Both clubs, Sunderland and Middlesbrough, just staying out in the relegation zone.
Well, what I will say about Gareth Southgate is he's been on this awful run, 3 points from the last possible 24, and they're still not in the bottom 3. So he's got the luck.
Right. Well, away from the Premier League, 6 of our clubs were involved in the first round of the FA Cup, and 4 of them made it to yesterday's second round draw, Clem. Kicking off with the non-league teams, great win for Harrogate Railway.
This is a great one. They're now one of the 2 smallest clubs left in the competition. 3 divisions and 55 league places between Harrogate Railway and visitors Droylsden, so well done to them.
Yes, and Workington giving a decent account of themselves before going down.
Well, I'm not sure how they didn't bring Bury back for a replay, actually, because Bury took the lead, but Matthew Bertley scored a late equaliser for Workington. But then Andy Bishop, who York fans will remember, scored a hat-trick in just 10 minutes, which did rather distort the scoreline.
Yes, people wouldn't want to see that one again, I don't think.
Well, unfortunately, he just has. There we are.
4-1 there. And York City, though, crashing out.
Yeah, well, probably best we get through this one as quickly as possible. Mo Harkin with Havant score, and that's a mouthful to take into the next round. Havant and Waterlooville.
1-1 draw for Darlington and Northampton.
Yeah, I read something that Dave Penny, the Darlington manager, was complaining about the lightness of the balls. He said they're like beach balls. That's what he blamed for this. The wind kept catching the ball. It sounds like some excuse, doesn't it? Anyway, Greg Blundell, Colin Larkin equalised, and they've got another long trip to Northampton the same week they've got to go to Brentford in the league.
Replay for Carlisle as well. Thought they were odds on to beat Grimsby, who are right down the bottom of League 2.
It's a funny thing, the form book, isn't it? Struggling in League 2, and obviously League 1 leaders, but they conceded a late penalty, and Zigo Arinaldi, as you say, with Danny Graham off the pitch, took that one away. And here we go, Hartlepool fans.
Save the best till last. Half a dozen for Hartlepool at Gainsborough.
Jeff, this is how it should be. You know, when you're 3 divisions and 75 places higher than a little non-league minnow, don't give me giant killing, don't give me magic of the cup, just give me a good, stiff mashing. Barker, Littlemore, Brown and Porter for Pools, and that is a job very well done indeed.
Very nice. Well, Hartlepool's reward is a second-round trip to Leeds. 1972, Giant Killers, Hereford. Carlisle and Darlington take on Huddersfield and Walsall respectively. If they win the replays, and a deserved home tie for Harrogate Railway against League 2 side
which I think they could win. Mansfield struggling. That would be good, wouldn't it?
Clem, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Catch you later on in the week. Right, in Rugby Union's European Challenge Cup, Newcastle Falcons chalked up no fewer than 11 tries in the Spanish sunshine as they ran out winners by 71 points to 10 over Centranza El Salvador. There were 2 Tates on the pitch, but it was Alex who slightly put World Cup finalist Matthew in the shade with a hat-trick of tries to his elder brother's 1. Ollie Phillips also weighed in with 3 touchdowns, but the Falcons can't rest on their laurels with French side Brie visiting Kingston Park on Thursday night. And Clem's gone, he's left his papers.
I know, and he's left this lovely
one
of Belly's lying around. Thanks, Clem, that's very pleasant for me. What was that score in the Falcons match there?
71-10.
And they're
just
not,
about kept up the score.
Yeah, they're not the only forces of nature around at the moment, Trai, then, are they?
No, absolutely not. It would have taken the 10 teams of Falcons to have stirred up the North Sea as it was this weekend. Absolutely explosive, as you can see from the pictures here. Haven't seen it this rough in a very, very long time, and I can tell you the wind, the strong northerly wind, was so cold. We were all donning hats, scarves, gloves, you name it, to go out and get these pictures for you. I wouldn't fancy being on a boat this weekend out there. You'd have had to pay me an awful lot of money to set out on those high seas. But the winds were extremely strong, and just look at this, Whitley Bay getting a pasting here as well, as those waves just battered the sea defences there. So very rough indeed. Citizens of Whitley Bay and the rest of the coast will be very glad to know that the winds are finally dying down. Now, the other big story weather-wise of the weekend was the cold. Look at these temperatures from last night. Shap, the coldest, at -8 Celsius, and only the coasts above freezing. That tonight, the good news is it's much milder, and that's because we've got a lot of cloud and some wet weather coming our way. You can see the rain's been working its way down from Scotland. It's just stuttering its way across the borders at the moment, making its way southwards. It'll continue on its journey, and most of us should be dry again by dawn tomorrow morning. This is probably the coldest part of the night. Temperatures will bounce up above freezing everywhere, 1 to 3 Celsius. Into tomorrow, a dry day ahead for most of us, some good bright and sunny spells, particularly in central and western areas. The most likely place to catch a shower tomorrow at the eastern flank, with more cloud and those showers just creeping in off the North Sea. The waves heading down to moderate. Through the rest of the week then, Wednesday brings some rain into the west. Thursday, more cloud generally, but mostly dry. And for the end of the week, poor old Friday looks a right mess. We've got the next lot of fronts working their way in, so it looks like we'll have rain at times through Friday and into the weekend as well. Carol.
Oh, it is cold, Trai. Thank you very much. Right, now, let's have a recap of tonight's headlines. The family of a boy who suffered severe brain damage at birth have been awarded £3.6 million. Hospital staff in Whitehaven didn't notice that Bradley Crawford was being starved of oxygen. And 5,000 birds are to be slaughtered after an outbreak of bird flu at a turkey farm in Norfolk. And that's it from us tonight, Jeff. Take this away, please, will you?
Sorry about that.
See you back here tomorrow. Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
We're having a laugh at the UK's most ridiculous laws in The One Show next here on BBC One. And an incredible story of hope is uncovered on BBC Two when This World goes inside Burma's uprising. New music with sound on 3, and the world news is on BBC4.
Put your best foot forward and do something different at Pudsy's BBC Children in Need Party. Friday the 16th of November at the Reg Ed Centre. To find out more, go to bbc.co.uk/Pudsey.
Look at him.
Make it quick.
He's wireless, HD ready, future-proofed, yet he can't get it together to buy a TV licence. He got a reminder in the post, but like everything else, that went straight at his new titanium paper shredder. If only he knew their database has every address about a TV licence, he'd soon get one. He's risking a visit from an enforcement officer and a good old-fashioned court appearance if he doesn't.
Pay at tvlicensing.co.uk.
A major new film for BBC Two, starring Maggie Smith.
This isn't a ghost story. No, this is worse than a ghost story. For me, anyway.
Ruth Wilson and David Walliams.
I'm really going to shock you, I think.
I doubt that.
Written and directed by the award-winning Stephen Polyakov.
People said he knew so many secrets.
Do you want to hear the real story, Mary?
Here was someone who was far more powerful than me.
Capturing Mary, tonight at 9 on BBC Two.
Jack D is live at the Apollo in a brand new series tonight at 10:35. Now on BBC One, David Blunkett's bound for his old Sheffield home in The One Show.
Hello, good evening, welcome to The One Show with Christine Blakely.
And Adrian Childs, and tonight we're joined by David Blunkett and Sadie too. Hello, Sadie.
David,
Hello.
did you make it? Oh, a little wag of the tail there. That was
I
nice
did,
to see.
yeah.
Did you make it to a remembrance service?
I did. I went to the one in Sheffield, and the dog barked, not when the cannon went off with a 2-minute silence, but when the presentation of arms took place. And she did that when George Bush came over 4 years ago for an official visit, and President Putin and the Queen asked me all about her and why it was that she could put up with the cannons, but she couldn't put up with the presentation of arms. And I think it was because it just scared her.
Fantastic.
So this great bark went, she did it yesterday, and I was a little bit embarrassed, although the crowd, I think, were quite understanding about it.
Of course. Sadie's autobiography is going to be worth reading, I must say.
Well, it'd be shorter than mine, so that would be all right.
Remembrance Day was all about those who gave their all in military service, but tens of thousands of men who did their bit have only now been officially recognised.
The action they saw wasn't on some foreign field, but a mile below British soil. Neil Oliver's been to meet one of those underground veterans.
In 1943, the Second World War was at its height, and a constant stream of men were joining up to fight. Conscription meant every man aged between 18 and 41 had to serve in the armed forces. But Britain also needed coal to keep the war effort going. The trouble was, despite the fact there were nearly 2,000 mines across the country, there simply weren't enough men to work them. For Ernest Bevan, the Minister for Labour and National Service, the only solution was to divert men destined for the front lines down the mines instead. 48,000 men from all walks of life were selected by random ballot and sent to the mines. They became known as the Bevan Boys. Warwick Taylor was one of them. How did you become a Bevan boy?
Well, I wanted to join the RAF. I'd already served for 3.5 years in the Air Training Corps. So that's the way I wanted to serve my country. I was devastated when I found out that I was directed to work in the coal mines in lieu of service in the forces.
So you were conscripted into this?
Conscripted, without any choice.
Warwick's brought me to Cap House Colliery in Yorkshire to see what life would have been like for a Bevan boy.
I'm going to collect our tools.
Okay.
To go underground. I've got my snack tin, my sandwiches and apple.
Right.
And I've got to hand in a token.
Why have I got a token?
The idea of the token is to identify that there is a man underground. At the end of a shift, there's any of these left on the rack. They know somebody is still underground.
Right, let's go.
Exactly.
So what was it like the first time you stepped onto one of these?
Well, the first time that we stepped into a cage, it was called the initiation drop.
I think I just felt it there.
You did. They let us drop it absolutely as fast as it could go, something like 70 feet per second. And we'd never been underground in our lives. We had no idea what we were letting ourselves in for at all.
We're now almost 500 feet underground. Warwick would spend 8 hours a day working in conditions like these. So this is the coal face, Warwick?
Yeah, this would be a typical coal face. This is not too bad, this one, because it's 3 foot.
Not too bad?
No. You can have as low as 18 inches. Can you imagine trying to swing a pickaxe to cut the coal in 18 inches? Not an easy task.
For 8 hours
and dangerous.
Right, keep moving, Warwick. I don't know how much more of this I can take. What a place. And conditions for the Bevan boys weren't much better above ground.
We got challenged by the police quite often for the mere fact we weren't in uniform. You know, they'd be challenged because they thought you were a draft sergeant, deserter from the forces.
It must have been so frustrating for you. You'd been called up to do that service, and yet here you were being treated as somebody who was trying to duck national service.
Yes, that's right. Even the local residents were rather resentful about Bevan boys. Understandably, their own kith and kin, who were miners, were serving in the armed forces. And they felt we'd come there to take the jobs away from them. No, that wasn't the case at all.
Obviously, it was very tough, and the Bevan boys got precious little thanks for their efforts. Unlike the armed forces, they weren't entitled to go back to their previous jobs when the war ended. They got no service medals, they didn't even get a letter of thanks. But now that's changing. Yesterday marked 10 years since the Bevan boys were first invited to take part in the Remembrance Sunday parade. When you are marching, who do you think about? Who are you remembering?
We're remembering those lads that have lost their lives, because several Bevan boys did lose their lives in the coal mines during the war, and that's really what it's all about today. Quick, march! Lift, lift. It's a great moment.
And Neil Oliver joins us now. So our Bevan boys are finally going to be recognised after all these years, Neil.
There's been a long, sustained campaign by the Bevan boys and the association, and now, next spring, in fact, they'll be presented with a commemorative badge. They had campaigned for a medal, but the government's position was that as civilians, it was more appropriate that they receive a badge rather than a medal. But it will be at least one mark after all this time that they can wear to show that they were part of the war effort as well, and a crucial part.
David, I know you weren't in power at the time, as it were, but it seems a bit mad for mining communities to be denuded of their young men sent off to war, and then people who knew nothing about mining being sent down the mines. It's not exactly joined up thinking, is it?
No, it isn't, but I think part of it, and Neil may be able to affirm this, was the age of the Bevan boys and whether some of them were below the age where they would have served in the armed forces. But the lack of recognition, the lack of... They had no choice, as they've been saying. The lack of recognition is appalling, because they served their country. The country kept going on coal. We would have been finished by 1943, would we not?
It was a very simple problem. In 1943, the coal stocks were down at 1926 levels, the year of the general strike. And the war machine operated entirely on coal. Without coal, there was no fight. And so although in 1943 Britain was in a dark time in the war, it would have been a whole lot darker if it hadn't been for the Bevan boys. And it was entirely random. You got a conscription number when you were called up, and the digit on the end of that number simply told you that rather than going into the armed forces, you were going down the mines. So there was no way of campaigning against it, no way of saying, I want to join the army. You went where you were told.
I hope you can get the film in for schools, because it would inspire, I think, youngsters not only to know what sacrifices people made, including, you know, back home on the home front, but actually what terrific opportunities they've now got compared with the youngsters of 60 years ago.
Yeah, and it was no respecter of social class. I've heard fascinating stories of private schoolboys suddenly being spirited away from their boarding school and sent down a mine. You know, we would never have got anywhere near that kind of situation.
Like, it broke down class, didn't it?
Yeah.
But it's a situation that my generation were just entirely unfamiliar with. There was a threat facing the country, the like of which we can't imagine and those were the kinds of solutions that were put in place.
Okay, well, the Bevan Boys Association is trying to trace all 48,000 Bevan Boys conscripts or volunteers who served in Britain's coal mines during and after World War II. So if you know a Bevan boy or are one, let us know. Visit us at bbc.co.uk/The One Show or write to us at The One Show, 201 Wood Lane, London, W12 7TS.
David Blunkett, sparing his blushes, has a quite extraordinary life story. The road to the cabinet started for him in a very modest little house in Sheffield, within shouting distance of Hillsborough. For The One Show, he's gone back to the home he grew up in.
Sheffield is my home. My heart's here, my background is here. When I was a child, this was the biggest council estate in Europe. My abiding memory, apart from the perpetual wind that blew round the estate, were the sounds. It was almost Dickensian. We had a muffin man who used to come round regularly, as well as the milkman with the orange juice, and the rag and bone man. Of course, he had a horse in front. It was a bit like Steptoe and Son. Goodness me, this brings back many memories. The open fire that used to be here, the budgerigar that used to be in the cage by the window, the fish tank that used to be in the front window, and the budgerigar actually flapping into it, coming in at one end and flapping its way out at the other. It was always amusing. Playing with my dad, bows and arrows with rubber suctions used to drive my mother mad because it made marks all over the door and the wallpaper. I think one of the reasons I remember the house with great affection is because it was a sanctuary from boarding school. In the early 1950s, if you were blind, you had no choice. You couldn't go to the ordinary school around the corner, even if you were capable of doing so. You had to go to boarding school, and that was a terrific trauma at the age of 4. I remember walking through town with my mum and dad, getting on the second bus to get to the school, being traumatised when I was just left there. They had no choice. They just watched me for half an hour without being able to intervene as I discovered that there were dozens of other little boys. There was a massive building. There was a dormitory with beds in. I was going to have to learn to clean my teeth and clean my shoes and do things for myself. Stood me in very good stead later in life, but it was a pretty harsh way of doing it. So this was the kitchen. It's a small kitchen, but it's amazing how much my mum was able to do in such a small space. We had here an old mangle, and a mangle was what you put the washing through before there were dryers, and I used to have to turn the handle back here while my mother carefully fed things through and made sure my fingers didn't get caught at the same time. And we had a little dresser here, and I used to keep mice. It was a very odd thing to do in a kitchen, thinking back on it. We had tortoise, we had rabbits, and I think I always wanted a dog, and of course in the end I ended up with one. Well, this was very special to me because this was the first ever really private space I ever had. My own little bedroom, my own little bed, and a window looking out, which I couldn't see through, but looking out on the world. One of my really wonderful memories is listening to the crowd down at Hillsborough, Sheffield Wednesday's football ground. I could always tell when I was little when we'd scored with the enormity of the cheers. At school there was no privacy. There were dormitories, there was always people around. Here, humble as it was, I had privacy and security, and that privacy's rested with me for the rest of my life, so that I am never alone even when I'm alone. I just adored the idea of being able to get home. I was only able to do so for the 3 big holidays of the year. My dad spoiling me, in the case of my mum trying to stop him spoiling me. And he used to play with me a great deal. It was fun with my dad, and then suddenly at the age of 12 he'd gone. And I think at that point I started to grow up. I'll never forget when my father died after a terrible works accident. I remember my mum coming home and bursting into tears and my putting my arms around her and trying desperately to comfort her as she'd lost what was everything to her in her life. My mum fought for 2 years to get compensation. We got a little, but in those 2 years we had virtually nothing. There were times when my mum was only able to put bread and dripping on the table. And I shall never forget that, and I shall never be romantic about disadvantage and poverty. It was growing up here that drove me to want to be involved in politics, to make a difference to other people's lives, just as I wanted to in my own. And it's that driving force that's kept me going ever since.
David, it's extraordinary to us as we're sighted to think that you could recognise that house, because it can't have smelt the same. But how did you know it was your old house?
Terrific impressions of the shape and all the memories flooding back. And incidentally, a big thank you to Karen, who allowed us into her home, because it's her home now. Immediately going into the front room, and we had a window at each end, remembering where the old open fire was, the wind that used to lift the lino, all of those memories. And going up into the bedroom, now they've got double glazing and central heating. The only double glazing we had was the ice on the inside of the windows during the winter. So it brought back all sorts of thoughts, and very good thoughts really, about a good time in my life when I was very small and was able to play and enjoy, as I said, a bit of privacy.
But there's that feeling of space around you. You can kind of feel the dimensions by some strange sixth sense.
You can, of course, when you're big, and I was big by the time I left it, I was in my late teens, but when you're very little, the house seemed quite big. Now it obviously feels very confined, particularly the kitchen. I was amazed how my mum managed, and Karen obviously manages in the kitchen now. And of course they've removed the back-to-back range, which we used to keep things warm. It wasn't sufficient to be able to cook, but we could put the bricks. We didn't have hot water bottles, we had bricks, and we used to wrap them in cloth and put them in the beds at night. Goodness knows, when you think about it, it's a good job they didn't fall out and break anybody's toes.
And this very down-to-earth upbringing that you spoke of there, David, obviously helped you through the ranks within politics as well, because it kept you very real and kept you very close to the ordinary person.
Well, despite all the things that have happened over the years, including recently, I never lost touch, and I've never lost my roots. And the minute you do, you're finished, because you forget why it was that I came in to public life, and to make a difference and to change people's lives, and to have the pride and pleasure in being able to see things changing in the constituency in which I was born and brought up.
But the fact is, growing up with that kind of, it's not too strong a word to say, poverty-stricken background is not an advantage. Most people don't accept that. You're the escape that. You're the exception that proves the rule.
It certainly drove me. I mean, it was sink or swim, wasn't it? And what I'm trying to do, I'm developing a little pamphlet and doing some work for Radio 4 on aspiration, on the ladder. We call it social mobility, but for everybody else it's giving people a foothold on the ladder, and above all inspiring them to want to take the opportunity. And I reflected when I went around the house, what was it that could possibly have driven me, the tenacity to drive me to want to actually go to evening class and to get qualifications to get into university. And I want to try and bottle that ingredient to see if we can help young people now to aspire to something better.
Well, Children in Need, of course, are trying to do that as well, David, and here in the One Show we've been trying to get mobile phones off all of our guests, and yes, I believe you brought yours along as well.
I don't know, these may of course have been tapped at one time or another. You never know.
Quite possibly,
so I'm not entirely sure what's still on them, but you're very welcome to them, and it's a great thing you're doing for children in need.
Thank you very much, David.
If you're Home Secretary, you can authorise your own tapping orders, so you can actually authorise the tapping of your own phone.
And then have them checked out to see if they were proper.
We will erase everything on
there. We can, yes. And of course, if you have any mobile phones at home that you want to send in, stick them in an envelope, free post, phone back is the address and they will get to us. Thank you so much, David.
This next item's relevant to you, by the way.
It is, yes. It's about silly laws, David, silly laws. And of course you were Home Secretary for nearly 4 years, wasn't it?
Well, my opponents would say that most of mine were silly laws.
Well, did you come across any ludicrous legislation, or indeed would you like to...
for any?
Yeah, would you like to
I came
pass
across
them
some
now?
very serious ludicrous legislation, like 100-year-old Sex Offences Act, the Oscar Wilde situation, and I did something about that, and we put it right 4 years ago. We came across all sorts of odd things about where you couldn't tie your horse to the lamppost, which brings back the rag and bone men that used to come round.
The rag and bone people now, by the way.
Rag and bone people, yeah. I've never been politically correct. And, I mean, there's all sorts, aren't there? You're allowed to bare your breast if you're looking after special fish in Liverpool, and there's all sorts of weird and wonderful
St Christian OB to Liverpool
yes,
then
thank
before
you.
the
Why
end of
don't
the
we?
week.
Yeah.
Have a look at this. The one shows that Dominic Littlewood has been out trying to enforce some other ridiculous laws that no one's got round to repealing.
Right, PC Littlewood here, and I'm on the trail of a criminal who's been breaking laws. Very old laws. He's already wanted for cleaning a carpet in the street in contravention of the 1839 Metropolitan Act. He's been spotted sporting a beard in Bloomsbury. Henry VIII made it illegal to have a beard in London. And Elizabeth I decreed that all commoners must wear woolen hats on the Sabbath. Well, this is our man last Sunday. And I think I finally tracked him down. I don't believe it, he's only eating a pudding because of food rationing after the Black Death. Edward II criminalised the consumption of more than 2 courses. I have definitely got him this time. You're getting some of that. Nick, you. Yes, you.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, what?
You're
What?
coming with us.
What have I done? Impersonate a police officer?
No, for crimes against comedy.
No. Listen, I'm on the One Show at 7. Will I be released by then?
Oh, we'll see about that. I don't think Mr. Charles will be standing your bail.
Oh, Adrian, he likes me.
Yeah, right.
So what is the daftest law you've come across? Get in touch with us via our website at bbc.co.uk/The One Show. We'd love to hear your suggestions.
Now, this weekend, a book called If I Did It. You can hardly see the if, tellingly, but If I Did It went on sale in the UK. In it, believe it or not, O.J. Simpson describes the murder of his ex-wife Nicole and her friend Ron Goldman if he, O.J., had been involved.
Ron's sister Kim will be joining us to discuss why, of all people, her family has published OJ's book. Here's a quick reminder of how this ghastly story unfolded.
The American actor and former football star O.J. Simpson is in jail tonight, accused of murdering his ex-wife and her friend.
In a piece of courtroom theatrics, O.J. Simpson himself made great play of the fact that the bloody gloves produced by the police didn't seem to fit.
Other hand, please.
16 months after O.J. Simpson's arrest, the jury delivered their verdict.
Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187.
The most famous defendant in history was free. The victim, Ron Goldman's father, was close to tears.
I deeply believe that this country lost today. Justice was not served.
The former American actor and football star O.J. Simpson has gone on trial for the second time in connection with the death of his wife Nicole and her friend Ronald Goldman. This time it's a civil case in which Mr. Simpson is being sued for damages by the victims' families.
The jury has blamed him for the deaths of his ex-wife Nicole Brown and her friend Ronald Goldman.
Our family is grateful for a verdict of responsibility, which is all we ever wanted. And we have it, thank God.
Well, Ron's sister is here. Kim, that civil court awarded you what now amounts to $38 million
I think it's just under 40 by this point, but
okay.
yes.
So 10 years later, you've seen not a cent of it, is
That's
that
correct, nothing. He's escaped our reach for the better part of 11 years. He's been insulated by a team of attorneys that have done whatever they could to make sure he hasn't honored that judgment.
Why did he write this book initially, though, Kim?
He did it for the money. He thought he stood to make millions from it, and he did. He walked away with close to $700,000. I also think that it was his opportunity to sort of set the record straight about how the rest of us might have gotten it wrong. His ego, I believe, drove him to it.
So you wrote this book for cash. You heard he was writing the book, and naturally you thought, well, we've got to get this banned. And now we're in a situation where you're publishing it. How on earth did that come to pass?
Well, when we found out that he wrote the book back in October of last year, we were worried that he was profiting from it. We thought at that point it was a murder manual. So we did whatever we could to get the book pulled from the shelves so that nobody would see it and that he wouldn't continue to profit from it. But once we read it and realized that it wasn't a manual, and once we read it and believed that it was his confession, we felt very strongly that we would take this book and turn his words on him and publish it as a confession. And the rights were awarded to us through bankruptcy court. The asset was seized, and we were ordered to publish it. We didn't have a choice not to.
I mean, he would deny it's a confession, but he is, in the book, he pictures himself. He pictures himself standing in there, having just blacked out, but comes round with a knife in his hand, and the body's at his feet.
Right, and he opens the book, I don't remember the words exactly, with telling me that he's the best person to tell the story because he knows better than anybody. And doesn't implicate anyone else. He doesn't deviate from the case one iota. All of the evidence still points to him.
David, what do you make of this astonishing story?
Well, until 2003, we had a double jeopardy rule, which meant that someone couldn't be tried again for the same offence. Now they can, and I just wonder whether in this country it would be possible to have reopened the case and to have actually examined what appears, to the face of it, I'm very familiar with libel law, but what appears to be an extraordinary exposition and almost a boast, Kim.
I wish that we had the luxury of being able to do that in the States. We have the double jeopardy, but we are afforded the civil system, which is what we went after him for, and we were awarded compensatory damages and punitive damages.
So Kim, is this really a form of revenge to a certain point? Because after all of these years, the pain has never left you or indeed your family, and the closure hasn't happened for you as yet either. So is this something, just another dig at him in some way to be able to make yourselves move on from this?
The word revenge is troubling for me. It's an opportunity for us to hold him accountable for what he did. Every day that we don't fight and every day that we don't pursue justice on behalf of Ron and Nicole is another day that he continues to walk a free man. We were given this judgment, and the only way to hold him accountable is to make him pay for it. There is, I guess, some joy that we get in making him pay for the crimes that he committed, and I'd love to make his life as miserable as possible. I'm not going to apologize for that.
So you have been accused of this being just all about money. Okay, you are owed money by him, and this is a roundabout way of getting it, but people have seen it as money grabbing in some way. What do you say to that?
You know, we have a judgment, and that judgment was awarded to us unanimously by 12 people who thought he was responsible for Ron's death. If we walk away and don't try to collect on that judgment, then again, he walks away a free man. He's skirted our reach for the better part of 11 years, and as long as he's living and breathing, my father and I will pursue justice for Ron.
Okay. Well, thanks very much indeed, Kim. We appreciate you coming. Thanks very much indeed for that. We'll finish on something altogether lighter. Quite literally lighter. £160 million worth of Christmas decorations were imported into the UK last year. I'm not sure how many of them went to Eunice Fitch's house, but it must have been a good few because Eunice's lights are justifiably famous throughout Staffordshire and well beyond. Eunice, 25,000 lights is it you've got on your house?
Well, nearly there, nearly there.
So how did it all start for you?
Well, I love Elvis Presley. And Elvis Presley loved lights, Christmas lights especially. So I follow in the man.
Right. And what is your electricity bill? Is it huge?
Sorry?
What is your electricity bill? Is it very big?
Very big?
Yes. The bill, the electricity bill.
My electric bill?
Yes. It's high, it must be high.
Well, it might be.
Yes, it must be. Right. I think we can talk, we don't want to talk to Elvis there. We just talk to the man next to you. Now, Rob, you're the poor fella who's got to put all the things up.
That's right. There's over 200 plugs in here. Over the last 15 years, we've had about £10,000 worth of lights, which for a good cause sees these that then all smiling and that, and he brings a smile to the face of that most of the days.
Right. So, do you got much technical wisdom to put these things up? You look like the man who knows his way around a fairy light.
I've done it for the last 15 years and it's kept going, but it's getting bigger and bigger.
Right. Was your hair curly before you started messing with electricity, or did you just touch the wrong wire one day? Something like that. Right, it's time to turn on Eunice Fitch's lights. OK, we've got a big crowd there. Get them, are they ready to rumble? Ladies and gentlemen, up there outside the Fitch's house, please commence the countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
It's done.
What a glorious moment. And if you reckon you have bigger or better lights, let us know. We want to find the brightest street in the UK. So send us your photos, bbc.co.uk/The One Show.
Perhaps you think Christmas lights are becoming a bit of a nuisance. Actually, I know a street in Stourbridge which is actually going to win this. And if they don't win it, it won't be for want of me trying to get them to win it, because it's simply marvellous up there. You know who you are. Do get in touch. Now, come on, Scrooges, pipe up and tell us what you think. If you think these things are a bit of a nuisance, we beg to differ.
On tomorrow's show, Dan Snow. Dan is live at the Tutankhamun exhibition for us.
Cunning Planets have Time Team's Tony Robinson here, talking about being TV's Mr. Archaeology as well. We'll see you tomorrow. Join us 7 o'clock. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Next on BBC One, airborne drama with the helicopter heroes.
When I grow up, I want to live to 150 and have a car that drives itself.